Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Bill Strogis, who is the CRO of Trax Technologies. One of the cool things about Bill is he is a grizzled veteran like myself, where he's got 30 years of experience in enterprise software. He's been a 4-time chief revenue officer, has an awesome proven track record of building go-to-market teams, and is in a cutting-edge technology space over at Trax Tech. Bill, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm happy to be here.
I loved our little pre-chat. We went deep, and I always have to with certain guests, not all of them, right? But you're one of them. I always have to cut myself off so we don't go through all the juice before we turn the mic on and hit record. Anyways, why don't we do a real quick revenue rundown so folks understand where you guys are at in the stage of the journey over at Trax Technology. So can you give us an understanding of where you're at in terms of the revenue stage?
Yeah, so we're a bit of a sort of a bit of a start over, if you will. So there was a company called Trax so Trax is about a 30-year-old company. Had really good success for a while, merged with another company called Veraction a handful of years ago, and decided to reinvent itself. Coming out of that reinvention, I think the revenue took a bit of a slowdown. So we're not a startup. We're not in hyper growth mode exactly, but we're a bit of a redo. And I think the notable part about that is we came to learn that what we do with the data that we deal with is so unique that we didn't just reinvent ourselves in terms of changing the name to Trax Technologies and be a merged company. We're really focused on building a data platform, a truly modern, state-of-the-art SaaS data platform that serves a very old problem. Like freight audit payment's been around forever. It's not that sexy. It's not that innovative. But what Trax is doing, it truly is. So I'm mostly answering your question, except that I think the important part is that we're not a startup because we have 30 years of experience or close to 30 years of experience. We have customers that are some of the largest, most complex supply chains in the world, many of the Fortune 500. But where we are in our thinking and our mode, we're very much like a scrappy startup because we've started over as this data focused freight audit company.
Okay, love that, man. Never heard of it referred to as a start over, if you will. So I think that's good.
Yeah. There's a
Can you,
lot of doing all new leadership, a new focus. It's really the best of both worlds because we can take all this experience that we have and these great customers and all the good work that's been done over decades, and then in reinventing ourselves to be more of a tech company and less of a services company, more about the data and building a platform, a proper SaaS platform. It's kind of exciting because people know who we are, but we're
yeah,
we're,
I mean
we're
that,
doing everything different. We're doing everything better. So it's a lot of fun.
that's cool. That's good positioning. And then, so what's your primary go to market for growing your customer, base, growing the organization? What's your primary go to market?
Yeah. So this industry and Trax very much so is an example of a very RFP driven world.
Oof.
So what we inherited was a company that largely waited for RFPs to come in the door. And it would not be a stretch to argue that that's not selling, right? That's facilitating somebody's buying process. So our go-to-market motion is intentionally right now probably the hardest way to sell enterprise software. We don't have a large channel. We don't have, a giant marketing budget. You're never going to see I shouldn't say never, but anytime soon, you're not going to see a Trax billboard at the airport, those kinds of things. We're doing it the hard way. We're understanding our target audience's business. We're giving them a reason to talk to us. We're changing their thinking about how the problems they have in and around freight audit and the data that comes with that can be used to address some of the biggest challenges these large companies have. And so, my account executives own much of the responsibility for doing the reach out. So it's sort of old school, real enterprise software sales. We are taking the people that we believe should have the problems we're uniquely qualified to address, and give them a reason to be actively looking when they weren't actively looking.
Love that, man. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, obviously that is the hard way. I did the same thing. A lot of grit required to make that happen, hard work
Yeah.
and intentionality with how you approach everything with that. We actually, so when I had to do it, we leveraged a event led go to market. Well, I don't want to say attacking. Attacking sounds like a bad, word, but basically typically targeting board members of functional organizations of the people we want, get them, and then that would help us with like a influence effect down the entire chain of the organization. Have you leveraged
Right.
anything like that as well?
We don't go as high as the board level because we are mostly targeting the Fortune 500. And as you can imagine, the board of a Fortune 500 company, let alone the C-level executives at a Fortune 500 company, not terribly interested in talking to a software company. We are targeting almost exclusively the people we believe are truly the decision makers, the executive sponsors of the problems that we help solve. We're not looking to talk to fingers on keyboard type people. We're going very high in these organizations, and again, that's hard. But I'll take one meeting with a decision maker over 50 meetings with people that will then try as best they can to not let you get to the decision makers, right? So, ours is a very focused sales motion. It's not volume, it's about effectiveness. We will have fewer meetings, fewer deals, fewer customers, but we're going to do it with excellence, right? This is not a transactional business at all. These are large enterprise deals, mostly with the Fortune 500. The problems that we help these companies solve are big and expensive and impactful, and our deal sizes are large, right? So this is not a high transaction business, and we run our go to market motion appropriately. Right? I don't want to talk to 50 people in a week when 49 of them can't buy my software, right? Or don't have the capacity to. And so we're very deliberate, right? I mean, guns are probably never the best metaphor or analogy, but I mean, it's very sniper rifle and not so much machine gun, our approach, right? And part of that is we intentionally don't have the resources for it. We don't want to do that. I don't want to build an army of people dealing with the noise in the hope that somehow out of that noise comes some level of success.
Yeah, I agree. And when I meant board, by the way, I meant the decision maker that sits on the board of an association or group is what I was
Got it.
referring
Yeah.
to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I love what you're talking about. Makes sense because like you make if it's not qualified on the front end, like you could literally waste 200 to 300 hours of time on a deal and you never had a chance to win, right?
Easily. And look, and it's the sales cycles are long and they're high touch and there's lots and lots of meetings and we have to go wide in the accounts and go deep in the accounts. So we don't have the capacity to be selling. My sellers can't do or work on 10 accounts simultaneously. It's just we just don't have the capacity for it. Now we'll get there, and we'll get to that point where that's how we grow, right? I know that you had Mark Roberge on one of your podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
and I've spent some time with Mark, and I very much value how he views the world, and he uses this term excellence repeated for scaling, right? And that's what we're doing. Like we're doing things really well. We're getting better and better every day, but we're not at a point where we're measuring that excellence where we're measuring the excellence, but we're not quite excellent yet, and it's not repeatable. And so we're not ready for that level of scale, but we're going to get there. And so doing things the hard way, doing things the intentional way, getting really solid messaging, giving people a reason to find value in our differentiators, all of that hard stuff, it's worth the effort, because as we get better and better at that, then we're going to be able to start to get that to scale, and we're going to be able to put more automation and more processes and more people and all that other kind of stuff. But I learned the hard way long ago that the growth at all costs is a terrible business model. It was very common not that many years ago, right? Got the VC community backs up the money truck and says, here's a ton of money. They expect you to spend it, and you usually spend it on people. And so I've grown teams from very small to very large in a very short period of time, and the revenue, matched, but our EBITDA was screwy, and our margins weren't good, and because it was it's a big inefficient business. Trax is not growing that way. We are an extraordinarily well-run business. We are very efficient. We're very focused on creating a truly profitable, sustainable, durable business, and you have to do it the hard way.
Yeah.
to get that to a point. So I'm feeling really good about everything that we're doing. Trax is we're doing an excellent job at very hard things.
Yeah, it sounds like, I think your approach is wise in terms of the way you're handling it. So you're not burning a lot of mental energy and physical
Yeah.
time and capital. I guess there's a couple of ways where I want to shift gears a little bit because there's some pretty cool things I think we could talk about. And like, one of the things that you brought up to me when we were preparing is just like how most people sell is certainly broken and the reason why buyers have all the leverage. Love to talk about that and get your perspective because I think there's a lot of opportunity within there that people are ignoring or walking right by due to the way systems and processes are set up. So, what's your thoughts and feedback on that?
Yes. Look, to the sort of the oversimplification of lots of problems, right? The umbrella problem, if you will, is that a lot of sales organizations forget that even though they sell software every day, their audience typically does not buy or evaluate software every day. So mistake number one is assuming they know what they need, know where to find it. My argument's always been, if our audience is actively looking, they know exactly what they need, they know where to find it, well, then what do they need you for, right? Now, the reality is, how does that express itself? It typically expresses itself in most industries as an RFP, right? You can't sole source, even though the company's already decided who they want to give their money to and who they're likely to buy. And then, the other companies think, oh, great, we've got this excellent opportunity to earn somebody's business. We didn't know anything about it. It was unsolicited, but, feels good. And so that's certainly a giant mistake because you have no leverage. But I think also sales, go to market motions, all of that, they tend to fall victim to being very selfish, right? And that selfishness is more often than not aligned to how human beings make buying decisions or how organizations go through the buying journey, right? And so the misalignment ends up being where things get broken, right? So if your sales process tells you to do A, B, and C in that order, and you don't know why, and because you're not training your sellers on understanding the why, you're telling them how to do it and what to do, and they feel like everything is a serial set of activities, the chances of that suddenly becoming misaligned with how buyers buy, right? Awareness becomes general interest, becomes, consideration, evaluation, commitment. They're starting to weigh risk. Like, it's a fairly predictable buyer's journey. If your sales process doesn't align to that, at some point, what you think you're trying to accomplish as a seller is not at all what the buyer is looking for at that time or what they're expecting to get from you. And so I think that's the second biggest mistake is that misalignment, where all of this comes together and really bites people in the rear end, sellers in the rear end, is that they think in order to not create friction and to be a good partner and to build relationships and all that other happy horse crap, that they just need to go fetch the sticks. I'm going to do whatever the buyer tells me to do. I'm going to do it when they ask me. If my champion in the making asks me to do something, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to be the best partner that I can be. The problem becomes you've lost all the leverage at that point. Not only have you lost all the leverage, but you're relying on those people who don't evaluate and buy software for a living to be able to connect to the dots between what they ultimately should be doing, how they ultimately should be doing it, with what you do better than your competitors. And that's not a trivial thing, right? And so I've built the latter part of my career. It took me a while to figure this out. But I've built the latter part of my career on being maniacally focused on building a go-to-market motion that makes the buyers feel like they're going through a natural buyer's journey,
Mm-hmm.
but without my team giving up the leverage,
Okay.
right?
So wait, I
And
want to stop right there. So
yeah,
let's drill down on that. Let's get specific
yeah,
because I think that's
okay.
awesome. So give us specific examples of how you how you do that, what that looks like, so that it feels natural without losing the leverage. Because I think a lot of people miss this.
Okay. So I built this thing called a customer engagement model. I didn't coin the term, but the model itself is something that I built, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 jobs ago. And I've tweaked it a little bit, but it has been fairly consistent. And what it is it's a bit of an agreement. It's a little bit of a chart that once you start building a champion, you can take to the champion and say, hey, listen, if I were you, there's things that I'm likely going to want, right? I'm going to need pricing. I'm going to need to understand what your software does better than anybody else's. Like there's certain things that everybody thinks that they need. And what I do is put something in front of them that suggests, look, your team is ultimately going to burn a lot of calories on this if it's something that's important to you. My team's going to burn a lot of calories. And so I think we owe it to each other to agree on what great looks like. And so what we've done is we've built this customer engagement model that is a bit of an agreement on how we're going to move forward, because there's some things that I need and there's some things that you need. And it's always well received for a number of different reasons. One is that my team will explicitly state, if at any moment we think this isn't working out, right, then we both reserve the right to take our toys and go home and part as friends, which is about the least salesy, least desperate thing you can say early on, is that I might walk away from this, right? And there's a talk track around it where you say things like, look, nobody's ever bought software ever based purely on technical fit. There has to be a business justification, and those things have equal weight. So the customer engagement model walks them through how we're going to do those things in parallel. Why does that matter? It matters because if you started too low in the organization, 9 times out of 10, the person that you're talking to, who's behaving perhaps like they might be a champion, maybe they won't be, but they're the quote unquote technical influencer, technical decision maker. 9 times out of 10, those people are going to tell you, well, the first thing is I have to vet the tech. If I feel like it's a good fit, then I'll let you get to the business, right? I'll let you get to the people who could ultimately determine should we spend money on something like this. And that, again, it's a perfect example of where, as a seller, you've lost the leverage at that point, right? You've made it about they've made it about features and capabilities and that sort of thing. But you haven't even at that point had a meaningful dialogue around what they actually need. They think they know, but if they knew, they'd have bought it already. So it's that kind of thing, right? So putting something in front of the customer that acknowledges what they're going to need, acknowledges what they're ultimately going to be challenged with in terms of supporting a decision like this, you know, getting access to the things that they need from us. And it's also a bit of a negotiation up front. Like people who wait till the very end of a sales cycle to start negotiating have missed the point. Every time you get asked for something, you should ask for something in return. And you've created this dance where you're starting to get really good at negotiating without it being an overt negotiation, and you just get better and better at it. So like the customer engagement model is one example of that. But the other example, probably the most impactful example, is the sales process that I build. And it's there's a playbook that suggests some best practices. From one company to another, the sales process may not dramatically change, but there is no one size fits all sales process, at least in my opinion and my experience. So you come with a hypothesis, but when you're building that sales process and you're being thoughtful about what am I trying to accomplish within each of the stages, you have to be really thoughtful about, well, where are they in the buyer's journey? Like, what are they going to be wanting? Because if what you want to get out of a dialogue and a conversation is different than what they want to get, you're never going to get anywhere. So I think being really thoughtful about the buyer's journey and making sure that every time you have a dialogue, you're thoughtful about what do they want, what is their objective for this meeting, but without surrendering that and not getting what you need. Like that's what real enterprise selling is about, right? That back and forth and doing really good discovery, but giving them something that they need, not falling victim to the very common mistake, which is, in the first meeting, I'll educate them as best as possible. I'll give them everything they need to know, because somehow they're going to magically sort through all that, connect that to what they should be doing, and then they're going to decide they want to do business with us. So there's just so many things that I've seen as worst practice, not best practices, that seem to be all too common still, right? And quite frankly, I mean, I've there's part of me that hates that that's still the case, because most of us then get treated like we're guilty by association. The presumption is most sellers aren't adding value. Most sellers don't understand the business. They don't take the time to understand the business. So I hate that fact. But what I like is that the people I compete with are probably doing some pretty stupid things. And by doing things the right way, understanding the business, connecting ourselves to things that matter, I can outsell anybody. My team will always outsell the competition. That part I can guarantee.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot there, right? There's a lot covered. I think it's so true though. Like, just me going back in time and replaying some situations where like there were situations where the buyer didn't even know what was possible, right? So that's like step one, like
Oh
what's
yeah,
possible,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Then
Yep.
it shifts over time of like, okay, now how do I make sure it aligns with the ancillary departments that also have a factor in the decision, right? And basically help them communicate. Then another factor is like, okay, how does this stack up versus the competition specific to our situation, and why is this
Right.
the best? And then communicate
Right.
that to other executives, right? So you're right. There's a lot of factors like that where, you feel like you feel like walking through that. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it is very predictable because the same thing happens over and over again. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's change gears a little bit because that was awesome. What about neurodivergent thinking when it comes to selling and looking at that? I know you've looked into a lot of different aspects like that in terms of why people buy. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's always fascinated me that most sales organizations don't. We've already covered a little bit of it, which is they presume that buyers know what they need and how they need to go about buying it. And again, they don't buy or evaluate software for a living more often than not. The other mistake that I think is just it's a bit of a head scratcher is selling is all about the conversation. Like at the heart of it, it's conversations. Some of those conversations we're part of. Some of the conversations are happening when we're not in the room. But every time you're having a conversation and you have an objective, you have to be thoughtful about what is the person on the other side of the table likely thinking? What are they experiencing? And so this whole notion of the art of persuasion, and there's all kinds of books, the neuroscience of buyer behavior, and it's just fascinating to me how often sellers completely fall victim to losing the attention of their target audience, right? We talk at Trax, we talk a lot. I mean, I'm doing it for years. We talk a lot about creating intrigue. I don't want to educate my audience. Like, right now, I and this isn't going to be an indictment to anybody other than previous regime. Like the Trax website is terrible right now. The reason it's terrible is because everything you could ever want to know about freight audit, which is not a very exciting topic, can be found on the Trax website. All of it can be found there. So who's the audience for that? The audience for that is people that are deciding what to buy because they already had a problem and they're deciding whether or not to include you in an RFP. That's not its purpose, right? You think about a pitch deck or first presentation, whatever you want to call it, same idea. If you think that your purpose is to educate because the person on the other end not only wants to be educated, but somehow that education is going to magically result in them going, well, great, therefore I should buy Track software. It just doesn't work that way. So you have to understand the neuroscience of creating intrigue. You have to get people to rethink how they want to solve the problem. That's hard, but that's selling. Like having really meaningful, effective conversations, getting people to rethink how they want to solve the problem, to find and accept and articulate the value that your differentiators bring, and to get them to a place where they go, you know what, I can't ultimately get where I now know I need to go. Didn't think so until I had my conversation with Trax, but now that I've had a few dialogues, I now know what great looks like. It's a different version than I thought, and I can only get there with Trax. Like they've made very clear to me, there's things that only Trax can do that are going to be critically important to me. Like that's selling, and there's a lot of neuroscience involved in that, right? Like buyer behavior is a fairly predictable thing. Most people go through the same things, and they ask themselves the same whys. Why should I do this? Why should I do it now? Why, like those things are fairly predictable if you understand them. And so if your sales process, if your sales messaging, if preparing for a meeting, if you're misaligned, like if you're not thinking about those things, your chances of success are very, very small. And so there's just so much more, there's so much more science to selling than I think I appreciated. Right. And it's funny because, having having a mechanical engineering degree, for many, many years, I used to think I abandoned it. I used to think, well, I was in mechanical engineering, now I'm in sales. Unless I was selling CAD CAM software as I did in the early days, it's like there's very little connection. And what I've come to much better appreciate is that an engineering perspective, an analytical approach to building a sales motion, like thinking about what are you ultimately trying to accomplish, and what should that look like, and what are the variables, and what are the people on the other side, like thinking of it in that way and building something smartly, building something that you don't abandon the leverage, but you're aligned to their buyer's journey and their buyer's process, and doing so in a way where you know what objective you should be trying to accomplish in these days. Like all that stuff is fascinating to me, and it's really what enterprise selling is about.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's hard to get somebody who's not paying attention to pay attention. It's not an easy thing, you know?
So true. Well, Bill, I love this conversation. Unfortunately, we are up on time. Where can people find you? Where can people find more about Trax Technologies? And then we'll wrap it up, man.
Yeah, so traxtech.com is the website. Again, if you want to be overly educated, there you go. We're not hard to find. I think we're putting a very modern spin on a very old industry, and it's pretty exciting. So yeah, we're easy to find.
Love that, man. Well, thanks for being on. This was a pleasure. I think you hit on so much more than I was anticipating with some of these topics. I love the level of depth you went into and just your view of it. Like it's one of the most under discussed topics. I actually heard or saw a quote unquote a key influencer on LinkedIn talking about how relationships weren't important anymore in sales, and it was all about the result, and which is really important, but like you're talking, there's so much more behind that in terms of unlocking what they're thinking, and attention is huge and at a massive premium now. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think we hit on a lot of really good things there.
Well, great. I enjoyed myself, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks for being on, and thanks for joining us as well, and I will see you on the next episode.